Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Hey, it's Tom Dutta, like Butta. You got to remember that, Butta. And I'm on the west coast of British Columbia. That's Metro Vancouver. We are truly international today. We have a guest on from Flagstaff, Arizona. She is in the green room. But let us get us going with a couple thoughts here. First of all, what are we doing? We're live streaming. Live streaming is next generation of podcasting, everyone. So we are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Rumble, which I just love. So that means anybody out there who sees us can hop on. And if you're on, you can put a comment in the chat box, ask a question. If it's notable, we can put it on the screen and keep it in the production. After we're finished this taping, this show will stay on those feeds. You can watch it live or replay, but we're going to produce it into an international podcast and a YouTube premiere video for the future. So you want to support us by getting onto YouTube and subscribing to the Tom Dutta channel so that you'll get those notifications. Or wherever you listen to podcasts, the Quiet Warrior Show, same thing. Okay. Let me tell you a bit about Devra and Jacobs. I just love it. You know, all the folks I get on the show here, many Americans particularly, have multiple names. I'm thinking, like, that's kind of cool. I've got 4 names. I've never said that to anybody. Thomas is the legal name. The middle name is a shock. And actually, yesterday was the anniversary of my father's passing in 2018. I love my dad. And my second name is a shock, which I learned in Indian is free from grief. What an interesting name. And apparently I have a third name, but we won't get into that. So Devra Ann Jacobs, I love the bio. It's succinct, it's clear. She's an intuitive life coach. She is a former publisher of Mystic Pop magazine and author of A Happy Move, also a literary agent. And here's the most notable thing about Devra. She's moved 29 times. So I said to her when we came back on this morning, hey, are you at 30 yet? And she shocked me and said, I'm about to. So as you're getting into coming on with us, with Devra, think about this. Have you ever moved 1 time or 2 times? And what would it be like for your next move? What emotions might you experience? And what can you learn from somebody who's moved 29 times? 29 times. So on that note, welcome to the show, Devra Jacobs.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Flagstaff, Arizona. I think you told me Flagstaff means something.
It's a ski resort in Arizona. People never think of snow in Arizona, but we're at 9,000 to 10,000 feet in Flagstaff.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, let's tease the audience before we get into what's called Plato's Garden, which is how we're going to do the show, is have conversations, tell stories. And at the end, I've got a couple surprises and acknowledgments for you. So everybody, you want to stay on. Why don't you hold up that book? Because you got a pretty cool book there that you've published. Read us the title.
A Happy Move. That sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. And that's why it's intriguing. And you have a co-author, Britt Elder, so I want to just acknowledge that. You can put that down now. I'm going to just read something out here because I've read the book cover to cover, and I want to get the audience a little excited. It's called Third-Party Edification. You know, isn't it easier if you stand up in a room and have somebody else say how great your book is and you saying, oh, I did this book. I was actually in school this morning. I'm doing a university doctoral degree, Devra, and I was on a Zoom this morning, and somebody talked about their book and said, my fabulous book. I kind of went, why don't we decide if it's fabulous or not? So let me just read something quickly, and then we'll get into Plato's Garden. So a happy move. These are my words. Everything you need to know before and after the boxes are packed. Happy Move is an insightful, practical guide for anyone preparing to move, whether across the city, country, or even internationally. It's written by Devra Ann Jacobs and her co-author, a seasoned veteran, as you know, 29 moves. The book aims to alleviate the stress and chaos often associated with moving, and through a combination of firsthand experiences, actionable advice and worksheets, Jacobs offers a comprehensive roadmap to ensuring a smoother and more joyful transition. And most notably, I picked up a few themes or insights. There's personal stories in this book, there's cultural perspective, and there's emotional impact. And in particular, the two things I like the most, I'll save it for later. So, you ready to get into Plato's Garden?
Absolutely.
All right, then watch this. Okay. There
That
we
was
are.
fun.
There, it was fun, and it's a little jingle that supposedly sets up Plato's Garden. But let me ask this. Welcome to Plato's Garden, everybody. And my question is, what would it be like to have a conversation and be in Plato's Garden? I'm going to put something on the screen now and share with you. If you're on the podcast, you'll just listen. On the video, you'll see this. So, Devra, Plato's Garden was an Athenian philosopher. Plato was 427 BC or so, during the classical period in ancient Greece. And he was a founder of the Platonist school of thought and academy, from the Greek word academia, which is interesting. It was the first institution, apparently, of higher learning in the Western world. And so what they did is, you can kind of see on the screen, you see those images there? So it kind of looks like Aristotle and Plato. They used to walk and talk. There's three things we're going to do in the interview. We're going to weave a storyline through the things that influenced your context or influenced your life in three areas, Devra. One is macro. So what was happening in the world around you as you created your public work, for example, your book or all the things you're doing. Also mezzo, what was happening in your sector or the industry around you. And, I define that as you're a thought leader, you're an author, but also you do other things in that. And then the third one is my favorite, Devra. It's micro, which is you personally. What was happening in your personal life? Some go way back to birth in the childhood years that have influenced your public works. So I'll take that back off the screen there. So let's get into some fun storytelling. I'm just going to throw out a thought and then we're doing a riff on it. So here it is. I think this one would be micro. So you've moved 29 times. That's incredible. So what first sparked your wanderlust, I call it? How did it shape your approaches to life's challenges? Go back as far as you want.
It's interesting because with my family, we were the typical middle class Californians that, your parents bought a home, you stayed there,
Yeah.
forever until you went away. Which is what happened until I graduated high school. And at that time, this is not the case anymore, but at that time, I wanted to be Shirley MacLaine. I was a dancer, a singer. I wanted to go to New York, and my father happened to get a job in New Jersey and said, "If you go with us, we'll take you into New York every weekend to watch a show." And so that was my first move. And
Wow.
and there was a reasoning behind it. Now, I didn't end up going obviously into singing and dancing for a living, but it was an amazing year. And as soon as at that time Broadway went on strike, and so for 6 months I couldn't do anything, and I said, "Psh, I'm going back to San Diego." And so I
Okay,
moved back.
let me jump in there. This is interesting. So if you can just put some paint on that picture about the strike. So what era or what year roughly are we talking about?
This was in 1974 that I moved to New Jersey, and
Wow.
1975 is when they did the strike.
Okay,
And so all of Broadway shut down for the strike.
I see. Wow. So throwing back this out there, you said something about your father. Sounds like a remarkable man, or at least fathers tend to influence and shape us. Tell us about him, and how did he express his love to you? What did you do to gain his acceptance? Things like, how did what his experience with you shape you in your life?
You know, my my dad and I was the only girl and the youngest child in a Jewish home. So
Okay.
you could imagine back in the early 70s, it was, honey, you're going to go to college, you're going to meet a doctor or a lawyer and get married. And that was totally not me.
And
And
what
so
was his name? Your dad's first name?
Samuel,
Is he still
his
with you?
name, no, he passed away about 12, 13 years ago now.
Okay. I'm sorry for
Um,
your loss.
but thank you. He was a aerospace engineer. And he was an aerospace engineer until 1973, when basically the US government decided they weren't going to do aerospace anymore. And so he got a job in New Jersey as a nuclear engineer.
Yeah.
So, that pushed for that first relocation. Um, but I think I was just born a gypsy. I, my daughter says, okay, we've hit 3 years. You're about to get that itch. And it's sort of what happens about every 3 or 4 years. It's like, nope, time for something new.
Well, this is very interesting because in contrast, I meet people all the time as you do in your work. There are people who have been in the same house for 20, 30 years.
Oh,
And
yep. My co-author has lived in the same house
oh,
for
really?
34 years. She had no concept about moving.
So this is what I find remarkable about you. I just actually was reading a book by a fellow named Gurdjieff. It was called In Search of Remarkable Men. Now, it doesn't mean just men, it's men and women, but in the era he wrote it in the 1870s. And so you're in search of remarkable people. You're a remarkable woman, in my opinion. And what he was doing is actually he was looking for his identity or searching for meaning of life. So he was going and finding people and talking to them. So you being here, for many who have lived in the same house for 20 years, don't know what it's like to move 29 times. I can say most of my moves happened when it was career related. Actually, my first move, Deborah, was a tougher one. My parents divorced when I was young. My dad left home. He was addicted to alcohol. God bless him. He passed away. His anniversary was yesterday, and I miss him. But that was the first move for me. It was more a traumatic move where the house was sold and I was kind of homeless. Getting back into your story, so the 29 moves, we heard about your dad and that first move. What about mom? What was her thing? How did she influence you?
Mom was the perfect Jewish mother.
Oh,
She didn't go to work until about the time I graduated from high school, but she was Betty Crocker. She,
oh my
she
goodness.
she was the one that no matter where you lived on our street, every kid would come to our house after school to see what she'd baked that day. Um,
Okay,
I
but
was
you can't tease us. What was one thing she baked that you just love?
Oh, wow. Cakes.
Yeah.
She had her own version of chocolate fudge cake with chocolate fudge frosting, and I got it every year on my birthday.
Okay, that would be Betty Crocker for sure. Because I remember those boxes in the grocery store. Keep going. Tell us more about her, but particularly shaping you. What did she do to you?
It was funny because she had the opposite effect on me. I was so much more like my father. And
Mm,
my father was the adventurer. He was a Boy Scout leader, and would, go backpacking every summer in the middle of nowhere in the high Sierra Mountains. And I was that way. I was the wild child. So I used to go with the Boy Scouts backpacking. um, and kayaking and doing all these crazy things. Um, my mother, I watched her in this role and said, I don't want to be that.
yeah.
So
I
that's more of the influence.
So you painted everybody in Plato's Garden here with author Devra and Jacobs. The book itself about a happy move. I am getting this sense, and it comes out of you. It pours on the screen that you're a happy person. And I just want to riff on some critical thinking. We're connecting the dots to the things you say. That when I think about the book's titled Happy Move. You're the wild girl, the only one there in the family who's challenging the status quo. You just told us some of the things you love to do. I think that innately create. What do you think about this? That creative people tend to get bored and they need to explore life and be in the moment. Moving 29 times
Right.
to someone like you is kind of fun. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I love people. And that's part of what I've learned in all these moves is I always set myself up to go someplace totally different, where the culture is different, where the food's different. I mean, one of my moves was to Korea. And I love to get to know the actual people in places that I go.
Yeah. And you talk about that in the book too, I think, the story of Korea.
Yeah, so I mean that was I got married to somebody in the military, and the military said you can't go, it's not for dependents. And I
Yeah.
said, sure I can, and I got a tourist visa.
That's a great story. I think that how do you feel about if I say you have a worldview? And what does that mean to you if you have a worldview?
I think what I've learned is we're all exactly the same. We just speak different languages and eat different food.
Ooh, I like that. I like that, especially the part about the different food, but we're all the same. It made me think about I do a lot of watching of cooking shows because it's a passion. And I watched a cooking show recently where they interviewed the Dalai Lama, and it was a fellow named Rick Stein who has a British cooking show, and Devra. They were in this deep engagement. The camera was on, and the Dalai Lama says, wait a minute, wait a minute. And in his language, he explained how we are all connected by food. We are all the same. So I think your insight there is brilliant. Let's get you to hold up that book again there and just tell us the title again.
A happy move. And people say, isn't that kind of an oxymoron that you could have a happy move? And it's not. I mean, the whole point of relocation, whether it's for a job or a marriage or anything else, is supposed to be exciting, right?
Yeah.
And then people go into the stress of the move. And the whole point of this book is to show you what silly, crazy things I've done that you shouldn't do in a move, but how to plan it so you're not in stress. You don't have anxiety. You got it all exactly the way it needs to be, and you can be excited.
Yeah, that's very, very insightful. I'm going to put on the screen here a ebook I have just in a minute, and I'm going to scroll through just to show you a couple of things that stood out, get you to talk about it. It's interesting. I'm a big fan of neuroscience. And when I say neuroscience, we're talking about the brain, right?
Right.
You have a brain? I
Yeah,
do.
I hope so. I think I still do.
In high school, I was called egghead, and then I started getting unconscious doing podcasts and go, "What's wrong with the shape of my head?" And then sometimes, when in the Brad house, they say you have a brain about this big. But in 2018, many of my followers know I fell on my head and had a serious brain injury, and I had to recover. So, in the world of neuroscience, there's a brain chemical called oxytocin. And why I'm saying that is my brain goes in funny directions when you speak. You said a happy move, isn't it an oxymoron? And I thought of oxytocin, and oxytocin is released in the brain. It's called the love chemical when you feel happy. So there's a connection.
There you
It's
go.
not an oxytocin. It's not an oxymoron. It's an oxytocin title.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You just conquered the world of neuroscience. Hey, I'm going to do a shout out to those who are watching us. I see on the live here. Whatever feed you're on, if it allows you to comment in the comments, please ask a question, make a comment. I see it in the studio. Might be able to feature it on the show itself. Hey, I'm going to put this on the screen here. Thanks to Devra, you sent me, it's called the ebook. What a beautiful cover. And one of the things I'm going to flip to is page 21. And don't worry, because it might be out of sync with your book, but you can just look at this. There it is. So you structured this book in an interesting way. There's part one before you move, and then throughout the book you've got a couple other parts. Just talk to us about that why you structured it that way, and tell us about those other two pieces.
It took me many, many moves to realize that really to have a successful move, you need to break it down and plan it out
Yeah,
properly.
yeah,
And before you move, um, what I kept realizing is there were steps I needed to take even months before move. Going out, going in and purging things you don't want, that grandmother's vase that you always hated and you have in a closet, mail it to one of your relatives. Let them enjoy it instead of you paying the cost to move it or having the effort to pack something you don't want. A lot of times I had one person tell me how amazing it was for her just to go through her closet and get
Wow.
rid of clothes that she'd had in there for 20 years, but
Yeah.
she hadn't ever moved. Pre-planning, if you're older and you're moving to a condo from a big house you raised your family in, you can learn so much about what to do before the move that makes it easier for you. You
Yeah.
know, uh, Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say that that's the thing about the book that is remarkable is it's almost a mini workbook where you can do some planning, right?
Yeah, and it's got forms in it because if you fill out the forms that are in it before you move, then once you've moved, all of the information that they're going to need at the new utility company or new doctors or new gas company, you've got it all right there in the book.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing you have to carry with you. It's even got pages in the back where you can tape in business cards,
Yeah. I
because
saw that.
yeah, I mean, it's so important. People don't understand that if you have all the information, maybe for your water company before you move, when you go to turn on water at the new location, sometimes you don't have to pay deposits if you give them the information from your last place. But instead of going in your phone and trying to find this information, all you got to do is have your book with you.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I've got on the screen here another page in the book. Again, if you're out there and you have the book, this doesn't correspond to the actual book pages. This is an ebook. Obviously, this is a silly question because I'm silly. That's a cute little baby. Is that a grandchild or just a stock photo?
That's a stock photo.
Okay. Do you have?
My grandchild's going to be 21 in a couple weeks.
Oh, you're blessed. Congratulations. How many children do you have?
I have one who has one.
Wonderful. Boy or girl is he or
All
she?
girls. Even our
Oh,
pets are
nice.
girls.
Oh, I love it. So back to again, everybody with Devra Jacobs, the co-author of this book, the way it's structured. I'm getting into that a bit. Here's it says chapter 2, services to have disconnected, and going to what you said. If I flip the page, you can start seeing on the screen, everyone. Look at this, Devra's tips. So there's a lot of tips in the book. Schedule services to be disconnected. But there it is, what you just told us, a visual of, look at that. It's a workbook. The water company, the electric company, the sewer, the phone, the internet, cable services, etc., yard services. I even went further and thought, well, which one of these I never think about? Well, pest control, spa pool services, homeowners association. The book is just full of that stuff. So I honor you for doing that. And I'll stop on this one and give it back to you with another thought to talk about. Here it says chapter 3, services to schedule for connection. So now we're taking the journey from, okay, before I move, here's some things I should be doing. Writing it down in this paper makes it more easy, more organized. Did you learn this or which of the 29 moves did you crash and burn and go, okay, I got to start writing things like this?
Oh, Lord, probably about half of them.
Wow.
There was something, as you go through the stories in the book, there was something major in probably the first 15,
Yeah.
18 moves I made. And then I finally started learning, okay, this happened in one move. Let's not have that happen again. This happened in another move. I don't want to do that again. And so this book really, I wanted to put every single pitfall you can fall
Yeah.
into that I fell into, or even some of the other, friends of mine. As soon as they heard I was writing this book, they were like, "Let me tell you what happened to me."
Yeah.
Uh, and so I really wanted people to be so prepared, like over prepared.
So you said this happened, this and that. Let's put some specific to it. Give me an example in one of the moves. So try to draw a picture so we can see it. What was the move? Were you moving from like U.S. to Korea or whatever. And what was one of the big mistakes or one of the things that happened that would have been, this can't happen again? Just give us one example that people can relate to.
Okay, a good example would be when I was moving from Arizona to North Carolina,
Yep.
and I hadn't bothered to check the weather, and happily driving cross country, so excited to get there, and arrived in a Category 3 hurricane,
Oh my gosh.
where
You're
I
kidding.
could have stopped,
Wow.
in Oklahoma for the night and
Yeah.
totally missed the hurricane. It's
See
really
this?
hard to unpack a U-Haul in a
Yeah.
hurricane.
So on the flip side of that, what did you do to solve that going forward for your next move to check the weather? How did you do that?
I pre-plan well, I always have a map now of exactly where I'm going.
Yep.
And then I mark for the next 5 days because you don't know what can happen. You might get a flat tire or something. So I pre-plan out 5 days worth of weather. And if I see that there's going to be like one of the experiences coming back from
Yeah.
North Carolina to California, it was during tornado season, and so I took the southern route and went, way south to avoid all of the tornado states.
Yeah, and in the book, everybody again on the screen, a happy move. The some people might say, well, how do I check the weather? I think you've written about that too. Would I be fair to say that there's like an online weather app, or you can search that?
Yeah, and there's resources in the back of the book for almost anything you could ever want to know about
Okay.
where you're going. So, yes, absolutely.
So Devra, out of 29 moves, and again, everyone, she's getting ready for 30, which wait till later, and I'll get that on the storyline. We're still in Plato's Garden here talking about Mike or you personally. And out of 29 moves, what percentage of those were moves that you decided you need to make versus circumstances in your life that dictated those moves? Just a ballpark.
Probably 20,
20 where you decided or
where
circumstances?
I just decided, I
Okay.
wonder what it's like here. And
Okay.
when I was in Arizona, I've never been a real happy person about deserts. And I said, I looked at my daughter, I said, I think we're going to get on Interstate 40 and head east until we hit the ocean. And that's exactly what we did and ended up on an island in North Carolina.
Okay. See that, everyone, that's why the book's called A Happy Move. And you've got to, because, talk about a happy person. Half of 29 moves, she says, oh, we got to go just experience this. They say that some of the people are the most mentally healthy in the world are people who experience joy from doing different things. So I think that creates dopamine and this rush of this is exciting and new. I can't remember in the book, maybe it's there. There's one really tough move that I think a lot of people experience eventually, and that is when they have the death of a parent, and there's the home left, and then you got to kind of go. A lot of times it's the kids, and you got to go and start packing and organizing things and get the house ready to sell, and there's some kind of a move involved. Do you have any experience or advice on dealing with something like that?
Absolutely. When my mother had already passed and my father um, got sick on a trip we took and like passed in 5 days. I mean, it was like too
I'm so
fast, too
sorry.
instant.
Yeah.
And had just moved in with him to help take care of him. And so here I was, suddenly he was gone. I was executor. My brothers insisted on selling the house immediately, and I had no place to go.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
not only did I have to clear out their 20 years worth of, stuff that they were both professional people, and get the house ready and sell the house, then figure out, okay, where are you going to live? And I knew
Interesting.
I didn't want to stay in Arizona.
Yeah.
So it was like trying to end one person's life and start a whole new life for myself.
Yes. I just had a thought here. Put the book back up. Tell us if this is a good strategy. But I'm thinking, before my father passed, I wasn't really in his life, but say I was, and I had this book, it'd be a great asset to give to him saying, hey, Dad, start filling these pages in, like your rental, homeowners insurance, all these things put it with your will. What do you think about that idea?
Oh, I think that's a brilliant idea. Also for college kids, it's a
Okay.
brilliant idea because, college kids aren't necessarily the most organized or care about these things, but if they go away to college and they need to go to a dentist, let's say, they
Yeah.
have the information from all of their childhood records on who their dentist was to simply walk into a new dentist and say, open the book and say, here's the information. You can get my records. But when I know when my father passed, they were very private people. So I didn't know. Here I was. I sold the house. I had to turn off the cable and gas and all that. I had no idea what company they were. I didn't know what
Yeah.
account number they were. And these companies, if you're their child, they don't necessarily want to give you that information.
No, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. It resonates with me, and I know there may be a lot of people out there now just nodding, saying, "Yeah." When my dad passed unexpectedly, he had a heart attack, died in his home by himself.
Mm,
But I was estranged from him most of my life since I was a kid, and I just reconnected with him 3 months before he passed. And I didn't wish he was gone. I thought he'd still stay around a while. But yeah, when I walked into his apartment, because I have two other brothers, and it was, first of all, grief is tough. Two
mhm.
is if you're a stranger, you're not connected to the parent. My dad's place, I keep privacy here, but he wasn't a very organized guy, and he had this thing he called his den, and there was papers everywhere. And yeah, it added to the stress and the grief in the early days of trying to plan even simple things like take his clothing to the funeral home so they could dress the body for viewing. It took away from the experience of the
Yeah.
grieving process that was healthy. So again, I think I'll put it on the screen again. Your book, A Happy Move, can really be a great tool. Uh, Let me just throw one more thing out here, and then we'll shift to a different track on the questions. The themes I wrote down that were in the book were preparation, planning, packing strategies, do-it-yourself moves versus professional moves, challenges of moving with pets and children, adjusting to your new home. Is there anything off that's not on that list that you want to just mention, just at a high level, or does that pretty much
I
cover what?
uh, part of the planning that most people don't know and don't do, and it is all the resources are in the book, is learning about where you're going before you move. I had one person tell me that they moved to California, and when they got to the border, their ferret was taken away from them. They had the choice of either keep your ferret and go back, or if you're going to continue your move, the ferret's not allowed in California. So learn everything you can, what kind of animals, what kind of plants, everything, before you actually get in a car and start heading to your new adventure.
That's very good. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking when my daughter was young, she's in university or graduating university this year, the other side of Canada. But the things typically we have in our minds when we're moving is okay, the size of the house for her. If we have a pet, maybe the school, is it close to school? Is it close to shopping? But we never think about those finer details like the ferret or etc. There's a lot of people, no, I shouldn't say a lot, but I can tell you at least 5 I've talked in the last few years who had a pet and for various reasons had to move, but they didn't do the due diligence. They moved into, from a home, downsizing to apartment or
Mhm.
what we call townhouse, and didn't check in on the rules and had to give away the pet, which is
It's
very
very
traumatic.
sad.
Yeah,
It's so sad. When we moved here to Arizona from California, my daughter had a chameleon, and the rental market here did not allow reptiles, period.
yeah,
It's you wanna that's part of the planning, What
yeah,
is it? My father used to say, "Proper planning prevents poor performance."
yeah. I think that's a lot. Look at, I just flipped through the book and there's a page, Moving Your Pets, chapter 8. So you really thought about everything in there. The one thing that stood out for me, I shouldn't laugh, but it was one of those moments where, oh my gosh, I think there was somewhere in there I read that moving and then getting to a neighborhood where there's an environment, like there's a pedophile living on your block, or there's crime. And just tell us about any of the 29 moves if you ran into something like that.
I ran into something like that very one of my earlier moves when my
Yeah,
daughter was about 4 years old.
yeah,
And um, I didn't know that you could go on these websites and see where these pedophiles and things live.
yeah.
And those resources are in the book as well. But I had moved next door to a pedophile.
Oh gosh.
And I mean, he started making friendly with my daughter, and I didn't know at that time, and just had this weird feeling, maybe you need to check out this guy. And I actually contacted the police department. They said, "Oh, he's on the registered list."
Wow.
And I moved like a week later to
Yeah.
another part of town. But you should check those things out. Find out if it's a high crime rate.
That's
You know,
almost unforgivable to have to come into your new neighborhood. By the way, we got somebody just put a comment here. I'll put it on screen. Great podcast. Thank you, Mr. Raman. I think that's from another country that
thanks.
watches my show. You know, there's other things too. For example, weather's a big one, and I know that's touched on in the book too. But I'm here in West Coast Canada, which it's people misconceive Canada. It's beautiful. We have 4 seasons, warm currents from California, and we're surrounded by mountains. We're a city with water surrounding us, and I'm quite biased, but it's a moderate climate where we get cooler temperatures and then hot summers.
Mhm.
But I never thought about it. If I have an offer to move in my career to a place that is extreme weather or something that's contrary to this, I have to make sure I look into that. And not everybody does that, right?
Well, and fire danger. I moved
Fires.
to Eureka, California about 6 years ago and ended up going through those fires in Northern California. And I mean, for probably a good month, the entire city, the sky was black and the air quality was horrible.
Yeah,
Um, the other thing is to check on and find out what kind of natural disasters are normal. When I moved to Northern California when I was very young, on one of my first of probably during the first 10 moves, they had major earthquakes. I'd never been in an earthquake like that. I didn't know what to do. But as long as you plan, then you can get through those things. In Alabama, I went through tornadoes.
yeah,
I'd never even thought about a tornado.
yeah.
But there are things you can do to prepare, like in the South, you get weather radios or get weather apps, that warn you of dangers. So you're not doing what I did, and I was standing out in the middle of a green grass going, wow, it's windy.
Yeah,
So I think again, it's planning. One of the things I wanted to mention because you mentioned the international viewer
yes.
is one of the biggest mistakes you had asked earlier about biggest mistakes. When I moved to Korea, I didn't check anything about moving to Korea before I made a move to Korea. I almost got arrested the day I landed because one of the boxes I had shipped for houseware stuffs had a coffee pot maker in it, and it was considered a black market
Oh
in
my gosh,
Korea, and they
that's
thought I was
crazy.
gonna black market sell this coffee pot,
Wow.
so they took it away.
That's incredible. That is a surreal story, but it's one you experienced, and it's why the book, everybody, Happy Move, Devra's book, why it's such a great read. Now, if I was to take a map, and you know how if you get a map and you're a traveler and you take little pins and you put them all over the place, if I took a world map, just because I still don't get the context of year 29, just which countries would you have moved through? Or not which countries, but which continents, or just give us a sense.
I actually, the only country I've moved to outside of the US was Korea.
Okay, so most of
All of
it's
the
being
rest
within
of
North
them,
America.
yeah, all of the rest of them have been in the United States, and I think I've hit almost all the states except for the north central part
Yeah.
of the country because I don't like snow.
Okay. See, that's really good because I'm thinking out loud here that one of the gifts you have is you have a worldview, so you could advise people about what it's like to live in all the different states, which, by the way, I think is pretty cool, because in Canada we have provinces, and I've never lived in, for example, one of our great provinces called Quebec. The first thing I'd want to do is phone somebody who's actually lived there, because there's uniqueness to the culture and the climate, the terroir, all that stuff. Really, really kind of cool. We're in Plato's Garden, everybody, with Devra. I'm going to shift gears here to the bit about this sort of the sector, sort of where you've created this public work. You've been a spiritual guide and literary agent for decades. I think that is accurate. Correct me if I'm wrong. So how do you see the act of moving as a metaphor for broader societal transition? How does that factor into your spirituality?
I think it gives you a more open mind to people and cultures
Mm.
and what all is out there. I mean, it really broadens your scope when you move around a lot and you go into different states. And I mean, it's almost like different languages depending on where you go,
Yeah.
in the South or New York or whatever. Um, but as a literary agent, I read so many manuscripts from people, and I think all the moving is really giving me the opportunity to appreciate things more and can
Yeah,
appreciate
for
different
sure.
views more.
For sure. Just like I was saying earlier, it's in Search for Remarkable Women, finding others and doing this dance, living and learning others' stories, helps with developing our own identity. And again, it's, I think, why what you're doing is interesting to many people, because you've got this diversity in where you've lived and what you learn from others. I'm just going to throw this back on the screen, ready to load. We want to come back to that in a bit. We're finishing off with this spiritual shifts that you've made. Literary agent, just define what that is for people who don't know.
I represent authors to publishers to get them publishing deals
I
for their
see.
books. And I've worked with and constantly work with everything from first-time authors to
I see.
I've got an author that's published 25 books now.
Wonderful.
Um, so it's I love my job.
So let's piece this together. And everyone, again, Devra, when I talk about Plato's Garden, it's what we're doing is critical thinking. So it's connecting the dots. I want the audience to say, okay, we've heard about your personal life, your mom and dad, how that shaped you. You're this wild, crazy woman who likes to explore and has moved 29 times. Half of that you chose to. You have this worldview of the world, which is unique and wonderful. You're full of advice. And then we all of a sudden now we're talking about sort of the sector you built your work in, and it's like, whoa, literary agent. So help us understand, when did the literary agent thing come in? Was that before writing the books?
Yeah.
Did you choose, and why did you choose to do that? What's your main purpose behind that?
Prior to becoming a literary agent, I was the owner editor of an international magazine called Mystic Pop, which I started and created because I felt like there needed to be a magazine out there that had covered all paths of spiritual enlightenment,
Mm,
no matter what it was. And so I did that for 12 years very successfully. And then my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And being
sorry to
the
hear.
only girl and the only child living near them, it was up to me to take care of her. So I decided to sell the magazine. And when I decided to sell the magazine, I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I've got to do something that I can do in my own time from my own house or my mother's house.
Yeah,
And one of the authors that wrote for the magazine actually said, "You need to become an agent because you know everybody in the industry. You know all the publishers, all the authors, and
that's
just."
awesome.
And so I that's what I did, and I've been doing that now for 14 years.
Look at that. So think about this, everyone. Here you are, one person we're meeting, and I encourage you to reach out to Devra. I'll make sure we get that out on the show at the end where they can. If you want to know all the ins and outs about how to prepare and do a move, mistakes made, there it is. But then if you have an idea that you want to bring to life, just start writing, and somebody look at your manuscript saying, hey, I think it's pretty good, might be worth publishing. There you have it. Amazing. How long did you lose your mom? Cancer?
14 years
I'm
ago.
so sorry. Without getting into rebringing that painful memory, was it a long journey for her?
It was about 6 months.
I see.
It was only really
Yeah,
tough for
I see.
about 2 months. But, breast cancer is something that it doesn't kill you fast like some
Mm,
of the other
yeah.
cancers do. And, you know, when my as soon as my mother passed, my father was like, "Well, I don't need to be here anymore." So, it only took
Mm,
him a year and a half, and he got sick and didn't tell anybody because he was already,
mm.
"I'm out."
Wow. He was.
Yeah.
You said he was traveling when he got sick. Was it like some type of a bug or just?
He and I were in Mexico. We started doing these vacations about 8 years before
Yeah.
my mother passed. Every year we would go to Mazatlan for a week.
Yeah.
And so we'd gone down to Mazatlan to kinda celebrate her passing, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
hmm.
And when we got back, he had actually contracted strep,
Oh
but it
gosh.
went to his kidneys and liver instead of his throat.
Oh my.
And he just I mean, he literally you think sometimes people say they can pick when they're gonna leave. He didn't tell anybody. It took him literally 5 days from us getting back in the United States till he passed. He was
Wow.
in the hospital for, like, 2 days. He said, "No, I'm
Yeah.
done."
Yeah. Well, given his Samuel, so we're sorry for your loss. Aerospace engineer. I'm just piecing together what I know through personality science from some scientists. They're very analytical and not as emotive, or maybe just didn't want to, stress you. That's a very interesting point. I'm going to connect the dots on this. And by the way, Devra, this is exactly why we do Plato's Garden. If I said, come on and talk about how great you are in the book, is we'd never hear these other pieces, but now we can connect it to motives that I remember reading somewhere, researching the top 10 events in life that are on the stress list. Moving is right at the top.
It's a
Loss
third.
of a loved one, loss of a job. And having been through a brain injury and recovery, when my life kind of stopped for a few years, the stress we're under can turn into distress, which then the genes in the body just say, okay, it's time to take you out.
Yeah.
You're not active anymore. You're not walking as much anymore, so we don't need you on the planet. I'm oversimplifying, but our bodies are built for survival, or they're also built where, when the time is right, the body knows. And so I think it's really a last thought I want to put on this is that, did you realize when you created a book like this how important it is and how much this can help people to stay healthy, to stay less stressed and going through moves? What a gift.
Yeah, I was actually asked by, one of the publishers who, publishes other authors of mine.
Yeah.
They had called me for advice because their child was gonna be moving, and they knew I'd moved a lot, and so we
Yeah.
started talking about all this stuff, and they said, "You need to write a book." I said, "I'm an agent, I'm not a writer." And they said, "No, we wanna publish a book," and so I immediately called my best friend, Britt Elders, who is a professional writer, and said, "If I give you all the information, will you write this book?" And so that's how it came to be.
That's that's awesome. You actually transitioned into my next question. I'm playing with a new segment on the show, and I just want to, by the way, put the book back up. Everyone, just shifting gears here. We're going on an emotional roller coaster of emotions for a reason, to keep us engaged. The author, Devra Jacobs, with us, has co-authored the book, A Happy Move, everything you need to know before and after the boxes are packed. What a great story we've been telling today. This playing with this as a new segment. It's called Book Unwritten. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I know you're a creative thinker. So just have fun with it. So my question is, if you were to write a book about a topic you've never explored before, or something's getting in the way from that next book, or it's a piece of work that will change the world in a way you want it to be, what might that be? And dream big. Just throw anything out there.
I think I want to write a book called "Should I or Shouldn't I Write a Book?"
Oh, let's say
There's
that.
so
Say
many
that.
people that I talk to all the time that should write a book because it's cathartic, not because they want to be published, just because it's cathartic for them. There
Yeah,
are other people who don't think their stuff was really important that should write a book because so many other people in the world are going to relate to that book. Or they think, well, I don't have any degrees or anything, why would I write a book?
yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who write books that really shouldn't write books.
So I wrote that down. Should I or shouldn't I write a book? Let's give it a round of applause. I can tell you that my first writing was I published July 2017. And by the way, I'd love to have you look at my book. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I'm 6-7 months away from finishing my doctoral degree, which was extremely difficult for me coming through a concussion recovery. And I'm 6 reviews away from 200. So anyone who is like you, your advice will be meaningful. I'll get you to take a look at it because the next 6 reviews will form part of my doctoral. And I'd love your feedback. This thing, though, thank you. This thing about what got in my way, it was always like I was always so busy because I was a CEO, a business runner, builder of companies. I had excuses. One, too busy. I got handed so many books by people, especially consultants. So I had a library of books. But you know what my biggest barrier was? It was I didn't know why I should write a book. And then when I found this burning desire that it was actually about telling my story because I had a lost identity from parts of my life, I caught on fire. So give us one piece of advice to anybody listening. If whether you decided you should or you shouldn't write a book, what's one thing you can start doing today to get prepared for when that time comes?
I'd say I always go by things that I see that go wrong when
Yeah.
people write books, even if they self-publish books, is keep in mind, and this is not to be Debbie Downer, but only 1% of all authors make more than $10,000 on a book. Usually it costs you money because you still have to do the public relations, get yourself on shows, get interviewed, all of that kind of stuff. And since A Happy Move came out last spring, I got to put myself in the shoes of all of my authors, and I've represented over 72 authors.
Wow.
And they're always complaining to me about, I didn't know this, or I didn't know that, or what should I do with this? And I got it. It's it, it's been a totally enlightening experience. I even called some of them and told them I was sorry that I didn't, because I do PR too
Yeah.
as a side thing. And I had one author that I did a book release for a few years ago, and about number 69 interview, she called me and said, "Please quit booking me for things." And I didn't understand what that meant until the first week
Yeah.
my book came out, and I had like 20 interviews in 1 week. You're exhausted.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna write a book, I don't care how you go about publishing it, be prepared. You need the time and you need the money because if nobody knows your book's out there, nobody's gonna buy your book.
Well, thank you, everybody. Advice from Devra Jacobs, not just the author of the remarkable book we've been talking about, A Happy Move, but a literary agent, somebody who you can connect to about the ins and outs of publishing. I know a lot of people in the industry too, obviously. I had somebody on I just interviewed who you probably know. I won't mention the name because the spotlight's on you. Going back to what I would say to people from my experience, what I discovered along the way in my life is that I was achieving success so much in life and in my career, but I had this emptiness. Something was missing. I couldn't quite figure it out. So I was seeking. And when I learned that by telling my story or sharing with people things I'd learned, Devra, that people were telling me it was impacting them and helping them. And then I learned through my research right now, my doctoral degree, that in understanding who I am, I need to learn more about your story. And through you, if I can see in you good things you can't, and vice versa, you're teaching me, we learn about each other. And then I can really develop my own identity. And that's when a spark went off. This one thing that my experience is a gift that only I know how to tell, I need to tell people about it. And that's the only thing that mattered. The other part of it is all the other stuff's very true. Everyone, I was just going to add on to that I was worried about that. I don't know a lot of people. I don't have a lot of money. My publisher told me that you'll maybe make a royalty check enough to take your family out for dinner in a year. The average author does that. However, everybody, don't let that get in your way, because if you, in my opinion, Devra, if you're writing a book just to make money, forget about it. You're not. It's like telling your mom, "Hey, mom, can you write your recipes down? Because when you move on, I want to teach my daughter or have that as a legacy." My mom says, "Well, how much are going to pay you?" She'll never write it. It's a legacy. You write it because of some purpose. But here's the cool thing. There's people like you and so many out there. I created more income around my book by monetizing my book with other things. So I wrote a book, but whether you create a course or whether you have an ebook that you all of a sudden put out and you invite people to a podcast, or you do book signings, and maybe you've created a new type of smelly candle for someone's home, and then you start selling those. That's what I did. It's monetizing the book. I met an author actually who had made $1 million from monetizing, doing things connected to the book. I think that's one of the things that your advice is so right. But it's not about making money from the book. It's what you do with the book. So thank you. Hey, let me just see if I got something else on my radar I want to ask you, and then I'm going to go to honor you in a couple of things. Yeah, I think we'll leave Plato's Garden now. So let's get into acknowledging you. And I have 2 surprises for you. Are you ready for surprises?
I love surprises.
Of course you do. You're so much fun. And I was saying to Devra, an hour goes by on the show like that, and look at that, we're already at 57 minutes. So we're doing great. You're doing great. I'm going to while I'm doing this, tell us how people can get a hold of you and connect while I'm looking for this.
There's a couple things. The best way is to go to ahappymove.com.
Yeah.
And I also have a YouTube channel, A Happy Move Book, on YouTube, where there are videos of helpful ways to pack and things to watch out for.
Well, there you have it. Awesome. And if somebody wanted you to come and talk to a group or something, do you do things like that?
Oh, yes. I do a lot of virtual things.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So
we will, in the show production, put your bio and any link so you can get that to me. But now, drum roll, please, everybody. I'm going to surprise you with your first international Canadian review for your book. How about that?
Yay.
So I'm going to put it on the screen, and what I put up is very hard to see, but it's actually proof from Amazon. So you see it there. And I have the copy of the review that I want to read. So I'm going to add that now in place of that. So I've given you a 5-star review. Everyone, how this works is when you get Devra's book, once you've read it, I want you to go and write a review on Amazon and or goodreads.com. Amazon is a seller of things. Goodreads.com is where books are also featured, but they don't have a model where it's a sales platform as much. So let me just add this to the stage.
That's so wonderful. Thank you.
And so I want to just, okay, I'm looking at different screens, so bear with me. I'm going to read this out loud so we can repurpose it with the show for you to use on your website or whatever. So here we go. Everyone, 5 out of 5 stars. I titled the review, The Ultimate Moving Companion, Practical Insight and Surprisingly Versatile. Reviewed in Canada on January 27th, 2025 by me. After moving through my executive career many times, I should have read this book long ago. Authors, Jacobs and Elders, A Happy Move is more than just a moving guide. It's an interactive workbook that transforms, relocation into an organized, stress-free experience. With insights from having moved, oops, typo, I'll change that, 29 times, projecting, Jacobs provides actionable advice beyond packing boxes, offering life lessons that apply to planning and organization in everyday life. The structured approach is what sets it apart, divided into clear stages, preparing to move, during the move, and settling into your new home. It serves as both a step by step roadmap, a practical reference tool you can write in and revisit throughout the process. Various checklists and resources ensure nothing is overlooked, making staying in control and enjoying the experience easier. I felt one of the standout aspects is the unexpected bonus chapters on military moves and international moves, which recognize that not all relocations are equal. Jacob's thoughtful insights, such as delegating online research tasks to tech savvy teenagers, highlight the importance of utilizing strengths within your family to lighten that load and create a smoother transition. This book also provides insider knowledge from industry leaders in the moving industry, giving readers expert tips on everything from reading the right truck, renting the right truck to saving on moving costs. Jacob's advice is practical, thorough, and refreshingly realistic, whether you're moving across town or the country. If you're planning a move, whether for work, school, military service, or simply a fresh start, this book is a must-have companion. It is packed with wisdom, organization strategies, and a touch of humor to turn a potentially stressful process into a seamless adventure. My call to action to everyone, take the stress out of moving, grab a happy move, follow Jacob's expert advice, and make your next move smoothest. Don't forget to leave a review and share your experience. Congratulations.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You heard it right here, everybody. The host be called Sweet. Thank you for that. that is a first, and I'll never forget it. One more thing, and then we'll move to giving you the last word. I'm going to turn another camera on in the studio. Those who have been with us before know what I'm doing here, so don't say anything. She might hear you. Did you know you're getting an award today?
No.
Next time I ask you that, you should say, "Yeah, I do know." All right. When I launched the show, and we're almost at 300 interviews, that's 300 people, remarkable men and women from
Wow.
around the world. I launched the show to bring the remarkable people to the show. People like you, Devra, who have taken something in your life, turned it into a purpose, and really are making an impact. So I wanted to create an award. So it's called the Challenge Coin. Have you heard of them?
No, this is really cool.
All right. Cool is cool. I love this too. So it comes in a package with a little card. I'm showing it on camera. And so the challenge coin surfaced during the World War I era. And the practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces, carrying the coin at all times and presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with their unit. It resulted in a number of consequences for those who could not produce a coin. The most popular required the coin soldier to buy a round of drinks. My dad would have loved that. He loved drinking. That practice continues actually to be popular today. So the around the world, first responders, many organizations have challenge coins. People collect them. So they're hand painted and
Oh, that's
crafted and
so
minted.
nice.
And you can see the raised letters, pretty hefty. The front is the emblem of the show. The back is actually the intricate framework of the hero's journey narrative by Joseph
Hmm.
Campbell's work,
Yeah,
which
I
is
recognize that.
so there it is. And congratulations, you're now a member of the Global Quiet Warriors. Well done.
Wait, thank you. I am honored.
Well, I'm honored to give it to you. So what I'm going to challenge you or ask you to do is never stop doing the work you're doing. When you get it, I'll get your address offline. I'm asking the Warriors to take a photo somewhere meaningful with the coin, send it back to me. I'm creating a wall of the Quiet Warriors at some point. So let's give it back to you for the last word, Devra.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and I love how, to me, this show is multidimensional. And it's important. I mean, you wouldn't think something like moving is that big a deal, but in the scope that you put this in, I'm very honored and very grateful to have been able to share with you and your audience.
Well, we're honored to have you shared with us. And it's fun to have somebody who's just so happy on the show who's got a book called The Happy Move. So, on that note, Devra, thank you very much for being with us. And we'll see you again on the Quiet Warrior Show. And everybody, thank you. And live with true purpose, like you've heard here from Devra. Live that life that you deserve and that you desire. We'll see you all again next week. Be sure to check out the channel. Thanks, Devra.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, stand by. We're taking it offline. They can still see us.